Rwanda is a democracy, not a monarchy. These are the words of none other but Paul Kagame, the sitting president of Rwanda. Now, this great guy who has a turnaround and a transformational kind of leadership was born, it is actually said, in 1957, 23rd of October. He is the fourth president of Rwanda since 2000 to date. Previously, before he became the president, he was the commander, the army commander of RPF, of what one would call Rwanda Patriotic Front. And this, for your information, was a rebel armed force which invaded Rwanda in the 1990s. Welcome to Marketplace Media, an online platform that engages, equips, and encourages believers to say, inawezekana. If this is your first time being here, we encourage you to hit the subscribe button such that every time when you upload a new video, YouTube will be able to notify you. Kindly consider sharing and commenting whether you are on Facebook or on YouTube. The name is Marketplace Media. I'm your host, John Kimani. We continue with our discussion on Joseph generational kind of leaders. And we said Africa really requires this kind of leaders, because if you're looking for transformation, if you're looking for sustained development, if you're looking for a moment when we are going to have a reservoir of leaders who can be able to continue with the gains that leaders are doing, then there is higher need for us to develop and to mentor what we are calling Joseph generational Asher and Naphtali, or whether you're looking at Joseph, the father of Jesus Christ, or whether you're looking at Joseph of Arimathea. All these Josephs had one common trait, and that is they were helpful. They brought what we call turnaround effect during their time. And Paul Kagame, the fourth president of Rwanda, really fits the bill, the qualification, the description of Joseph generational leader. We continue saying he was born a Tutsi, and much of his life he lived in Uganda. No wonder at one point in time, Habariyama, and a genocide that it's unworth remembering. Paul Kagame in response actually rose up, and in about 10 to 14,000 RPF soldiers rose against the Houthi forces, which perpetrated into a genocide. And during his era as the vice president, a position which he abolished once he assumed power in 2000, Kagame actually controlled the national army, and we know, and it said, history has it, that he was responsible for maintaining the government's power. Many of what we call RPF soldiers carried what we would call a retribution killings, something that Paul Kagame fervently denied. In 2003, Paul Kagame was elected the president under a transition government. His major focus at this time was to build and develop national unity and to revive the dying country's economy. In 2006, Rwanda broke diplomatic ties with France after French judge issued an international arrest warrant for several of Kagame's close associates. 4 years down the line, Paul Kagame sought re-election. The opposition media of his day were against this, and so they were repressed. And some of them who were opposed to his candidature were actually killed. Some of the candidates that opposed his presidency were arrested, others ran away, others were excluded from participation. In 2015, a constitution amendment, And interesting enough, this referendum passed. Of interest is to say that Paul Kagame ensured that he would get two terms, which means consequently that he would retire from politics in 2034, and in favor of Paul Kagame. And two other presidential candidates lost, or they shared the two remaining percent. One source described Paul Kagame with these words, I quote, "The small landlocked country of 13 million people has come a long way since the civil war and genocide of 1994. Rwanda's significant progress in education, technology, health care, and security has made them." Can we learn from this story, from this African success story? But before we jump into that, allow us to ask a question. Because among the scholars, there have been a question. What is the leadership style of Paul Kagame? Is he a dictator? Is he an authoritarian? Or is he somebody who favors and who goes to what would call democracy? You know, some support him and some don't. He has critics. You know, those who support his authoritarian kind of leadership, they simply say, what other kind of leadership would Paul Kagame put in place and become effective after going through a genocide of magnitude that Rwanda went through? One of his supporters is Gatete Ginyiriambo Rumuhusa, who is a lobbyist and an independent political analyst based in Kigali, Rwanda. And he makes this defense, I quote, "To rebuild it, that is Rwanda, he had to rely on mostly uneducated guerrilla fighters and a handful of ill-trained cadres. Even the most optimistic of analysts doubted his chances." And the mere fact that his choice of people of his inner circle are guerrilla fighters, ill-trained, then the best way of running the government, according to Gatete, is simply becoming authoritarian. Some others, those who favor him, they think he is a strategic, pragmatic, a result-driven kind of a leader. One of the must-read articles, Lessons from African Leadership, Paul Kagame and the Transformation of Rwanda. There's a guy called Samuel Odnile who offers this perspective. He thinks that he is known for setting ambitious goals and holding his government officials accountable for his performance, for their performance. And Paul Kagame has little patience for corruption. And this means that Paul Kagame's leadership has what we call measurable outcomes, because under him he has encouraged what we call a culture of efficiency, effectiveness, especially within Rwanda's public institution. So now that we've discussed Paul Kagame leadership, style, which is divided, it's not more of not authoritarian, but is a result driven kind of leadership. Then let's look at what leadership lessons can we pick from this 66-year-old president. Number one, do hard things. Do hard things. For him, he believes hard things should be done. Somebody needs to do those hard things, and those who does good hard things will always bring about results. And we do hard things according to Paul Kagame. Big, hairy, audacious goal. And a testament or a testimony of doing the hard things is what Kigali is today. Kigali is not only the world's cleanest city, but it is complete opposite of a reminder of a genocide. It is an illustration of power of transformation. Kigali, when Paul Kagame was taking it, was a constant reminder of genocide. Very dirty, very disorganized. Today, as we've said, it is very clean. Lesson number 2: before you go for another for help from somebody else, make sure that you've challenged yourself enough as to how much you can do for yourself. Then reach out. They have the power, they have the potential to manufacture their own solutions because they understand their own problems. So they are better placed to be able to solve to generate solutions for their own problems. Number 3, resilience. Paul Kagame took over the country from genocide that actually claimed close to 1 million lives. The country was tattered, the country was in bad shape, there was a lot of orphans, citizens were taking over such a country, tattered, disillusioned. He proved that it was really possible for Rwandans to live in dignity, in harmony, and even more importantly, to rekindle the hopes, the lost hopes of the Rwandans. He took over a country where seeds of hostility were germinating and bearing seeds at an alarming speed. Interesting enough, while addressing Harvard Business young people in May this year, President Kagame gave this wonderful advice. We quote, "No matter how down you are brought by any factors or force, you just don't accept staying down. Find a way up. Find a way up." End of quote. In other words, what he is simply trying to say, both to us and to African readers and to anybody who is inheriting a tattered economy, he is simply saying, when you find yourself in impossible a situation, when you find yourself facing odds, simply don't accept going down, but look at a way, find a way of staying up, of going up. In other words, manufacture solutions so that you can be able to overcome those challenges. And then lesson number 4 is service. Paul Kagame is a firm believer in serving leader. One of the titles that he earns is a benevolent dictator. Benevolent dictators are men who use the rule of iron, who stamp their authority, who dictate things, but they do it so that the people will be able to benefit. And we can have a discussion, are benevolent dictators good for Africa? What Paul Kagame has done is that he has encouraged leaders to be deliberate in their actions and actually focus on serving the interest of people instead of their own. In concluding speech during a political bureau, him being the chair of Rwanda Patriotic Front, Paul Kagame made this remark, I quote, "Leadership is all about regulation and doing things right. You don't have the luxury of doing things in your interest while hurting others. When you do the right leaders in this forum to be proactive, to take steps, to be deliberate, to do things that will be able to add value, that will be an economy and not to be a lukewarm." He challenged them to be proactive so that they can be able to leave a mark. Actually he said, I quote, "If what you do as a leader is not impacting people, then you are doing wrong." End of quote. Very, very important. And because of those wonderful 4 lessons that we pick on Paul Kagame, then he must have done some achievement. We'll shortlist 7 of them very quickly. Paul Kagame has community service. We've seen him going out there, working, cleaning the streets, and then engaging people in a dialogue. Okay. Number 2, Rwanda has experienced an impressive economic growth with the last 2 decades. The living standards of Rwandese people have actually improved, and poverty levels have reduced from 77% in 2001 to around 38% in 2022. If you compare that with the Kenyan story, Kenya has not maintained such impressive track record. In 2022, for example, the growth rate was at 5.3%, actually is below national poverty line. The current administration is actually trying to raise the growth rate, which is now at about 5.5 and projected to go by 0.5 points. The country is stable. Okay, it's prosperous, there's unity, and in large part reconciled. The seeds of hostility that were growing have been buried.